Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show. Okay. So, I am curious to know more about, I know that you said before that you're a galactic ambassador, but I'm really curious because I know in one of our conversations, you did mention, I don't know what you would call them, race names or like which aliens are they, that kind of thing. And that stuff intrigues me so much because I hear more about it every day, but I haven't had a personal interaction where I've had that come into my presence, very, very vividly. But anyways, I'm curious to know what has been your experience with that and how has it evolved?
Yeah, I would love to address that. So I have been an experiencer my entire life. I know that I have been on multiple spacecraft throughout my childhood and teen years. Most of those experiences, though, I wasn't able to remember for a lot of different reasons. But the first conscious memory that I got to have of being on a craft was when I was 15. And this experience was quite a bit different than what you hear other people share with their experiences. So it was a nighttime experience. I was living on 20 acres outside of Olympia, Washington, and I was asleep. So I don't know how I got into the craft. I just know all of a sudden I'm inside the spacecraft. And I didn't have any fear about this whatsoever, but it was a smaller shuttlecraft. It was just me and my ET guide. And he looked very human when he picked me up. And I also felt like I knew him, like he was a friend of mine. And so it just seemed completely normal. We're flying through space, and at least from the inside of the spacecraft, the walls looked like they were transparent, where you could just fully see out into space. Yeah. And so kind of like we were floating, but there was a surface underneath me. So I could see the darkness of the space. I could see the pinpoints of the starlight. And then we were passing through different gas layers and just the beautiful colors. And we finally land where we were going. And when we landed, I asked him where we were. And he said that we were inside of Io, one of Jupiter's moons. Okay. And then he started touring me around what looked like a hospital facility where I could see into different rooms where people were being examined. Nothing scary, though, no probes or anything like other people sometimes describe. But everyone looked really human. And so very curious about that. So my next question to him was, are you human? Is everyone here human? And he said, those of you that we have brought here are human. We are not. We are humanoid, but we disguise ourselves because our form tends to scare you. Okay. And so then my next question was, well, why are we here? Why am I here? And so what he said was, those of us that were chosen were being tested to see if something happened to Earth, if we could live in an environment like that or something similar. And this was back in 1988, where we're still in the middle of the Cold War. We're on the verge of World War III. And so there really was a timeline potential where something could have happened to the Earth. So then at the end of the tour, I asked him if I could see what he really looked like, because I grew up obsessed with animals, and the weirder the animal, the better. And so I thought, okay, because of that curiosity, I could handle whatever it was going to look like. And so when he showed me his true form, he was about 7 feet tall. He had pure white skin, kind of like chalky white, big dark eyes, and very long red hair, like imagine fire engine red kind of hair. Uh-huh. And then he had triads tattooed on his cheeks, or that's what it looked like. So very extreme in his looks and coloration, but completely benevolent. And so then at the end of that, I get returned back home, but I was lying in my bed. I was like, that is the weirdest dream that I've ever had.
So did you feel like you went to sleep? Like you just went to sleep and then you had this dream is what it sort of felt like?
Well, it was so real. Like it was very physical. I mean, and there, this is the Cliff Notes version of the
Yeah.
story, but there, I really was there, and I really, again, I knew these people. It was just so comfortable. And so when I was laying in my bed, though, I didn't consciously remember that I had been with them before, but I'm just like, okay, that is just the weirdest dream. So for a few months, that's what I thought, that it was just a dream. But as you probably know, within the first 10 minutes of waking up after dreams, you typically forget details,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And a lot of the information. And so I never forgot the details on this. And so a few months later, I was reading Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, which was his book about his experiences of being taken by gray ETs. And this book came out in the late 80s. And at the end of the book, he's interviewing different people that had been taken. And all of them had the same gray ET experience that he had, except for one guy had a completely different story, where he was telling Whitley that he had been taken to a moon of Jupiter and told he was one of the chosen ones. And Whitley made a little side comment, kind of sarcastically, "I hope it isn't Io." And when I read that, my body, head to toe chills, tears started coming down my face. And so, that's my body's way of telling me, okay, that was a real experience. That was
Yeah.
not just a dream. And at the time, my mom and I were part of a spiritual school of enlightenment where we were learning about higher dimensional reality and things outside of, normal physical 3D
Right.
Earth life. And so I knew that if I told her what happened, she would believe me. So I did. I went and told her, and she got really excited. And the spiritual school that we were a part of had some of the students had formerly been either CIA or high government officials that had initially infiltrated the school to spy on what we were learning there, but some of them became real students and left their posts with the government. So my mom knew one of these guys who knew about the different ET groups that our government knows about and works with. So
Uh,
she introduced me to him. I shared my story. And when I got to the part of describing what they looked like, he was like, I don't know that race. He said, but we don't know all of them. There are so many out there. And he said, but you had a real experience. And so at that point, I was 16. And to have that kind of validation, just even from my own body, but then from someone, who was in the know, it was
well, so what
really
did you do with that information at 16 and basically close to 1990? Like, do you share that with anybody, or
yeah.
is that
I
something?
Right, I know. Well, especially in the late 80s and all through the 90s and early 2000s, this was a very taboo subject in terms of there were very few people that I did share it with, and maybe a couple of them believed me, but the rest thought I was crazy. And so I learned very quickly, especially once I got into more of a professional kind of thing. I have my PhD in biology. So when I was in grad school and I shared with a few of my friends, my understanding of ETs and Bigfoot and mermaids, they thought I was nuts. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be taken seriously as a scientist and like get a job,
Mhm.
then I have to keep my mouth shut. I have to hide it. And so for most of my life, I pretty much had to keep it to myself or just to a few key people that I knew wouldn't think that I was crazy.
I don't imagine that's like ideally healthy, because I have understood through the years that, like, if you have to keep a secret, it's really hard. It's hard on the body, it's hard on your mind, emotions, everything. So what do you make of that? Like, how do you put
Well,
that in the order of things?
I know. Well, it was really interesting because all of the things that we were learning at our spiritual school were completely outside of the realm of mainstream science that I was learning in college and then graduate school, and then even having to teach. And so I had this dichotomy within me that I was having these amazing spiritual experiences. And then I'm trying to teach something that I know is wrong and outdated.
Mhm.
And so I couldn't do it after a while.
Oh,
I
okay.
only was a professor for a couple years before I just had to leave academia because
Yeah.
you know, I was way before my time. Like, had I been in graduate school now, it's there, it's more open. People are uh, coming around, but even, you know, getting grant money and trying to get your papers published and all that, because academia is all about publish or perish, right? And getting grant money. The box is so tiny about what they will allow you, what they will give you funding for to study. Because if you don't fit their paradigm, well,
Right.
they're not going to give you money for that. And so science is very behind in what the reality is. Now there are consciousness, studies now, and quantum mechanics has really propelled us, in a really great way for understanding some of this. But in biology, evolutionary biology, now when I talk about that we have up to 22 different ET races in our DNA, and as an evolutionary biologist, if any of my cohorts or colleagues would hear me say that, they probably would absolutely think I was crazy.
Yeah.
So,
But from what I have heard, and I'm very limited in what I've heard. I mean, I'm into the spiritual world and I am connected with some of it. But one of the really interesting channel people that I've come across through the years was Bashar. And
mhm.
sometimes when they would ask him questions, I don't remember what it was, but basically it was a science question. And then he spouts off this information and it's like, he just told us the answer. And it's like, not that I understood everything he was talking about. And I know that he dumbed it down for the people who were listening, but is it right to say that, I mean, obviously if they are traveling through time, they're traveling through space and they're able to take humans to a certain place where they can survive, right? And then they have long since surpassed what we do.
Oh yeah. they, they the ones that are able to have interactions with us here on Earth, their technology is so far superior, advanced, and a whole different physics than what we understand. And so, when I come across people that are very logical or engineers, science types, and they're like, well, it's not possible. And I'm like, yeah, for us, because we're very primitive still. I mean, Earth humans, some of them have really big egos, thinking that we are, so advanced,
Top of the
and we
chain.
really we are not. And so, some of these groups, time doesn't exist in their realm. And so basically they can timeline shift. They can, we only experience past, present, and future in this very dense Earth linear,
Mhm.
experience, but that's not real. All timelines are existing simultaneously. And so they know how to jump around to these different timelines.
And
And some of them
imagine how
can
much
fold space
people would
time.
love
And
that. I mean, like eh, because they fantasize about it, right? Like they put it in movies. And
mhm.
what I find really funny is that I'm just going to call them my normies, but the regular, kind of in the box thinking kind of people that I'm friends with and close with, they love the science fiction shows and they love, and I'm like, it's kind of funny because even my husband is like, he loves Star Wars. And,
Uh-huh.
there are parts of it that I can tolerate. I get a little tired of watching it all the time, but when they're talking about the force, I'm like, yeah, that's actually real.
It is. Well, and actually, Star Wars is based on real stuff that happened in the Orion constellation, known as the Orion Wars. So in Orion, there really was this highly polarized reality where you have the Dark Empire and you have this rebel band fighting against them, which were the Jedi in Star Wars, but they're known as the Black League in Orion. And so you have this push pull in the Force and, some of the spiritual concepts of the Jedi
Yeah.
that originally came from the Vegans, from the Lyra system. And so Star Wars and Star Trek and a lot of the movies
Mhm.
and TV shows out there are based on real things.
So I want to pull this through just because I'm going to be selfish because I'm a creative person. I have a degree in art. I do graphics still, but you know, that was one thing as I continue to go through this spiritual whatever you call it, evolution, whatever. I started to recognize because people would tell me how to do something, how to connect, right? Or how to get the information from source, like your muscle testing or whatever you're doing. And they describe it. All these different people describe it. And I think, oh, I know exactly what that is. Like, I know it from art. I don't necessarily know it from another experience in my life. I mean, I'm sure I've done that, but to get in the zone and ask the question and get the answer, if you are in art enough, you know that that's what you do. Like there's frankly, one of the most annoying to me comments about art, because I did teach art for a while, is, oh, I can't draw. I can't do that. Right. And my thought there is like, well, you think you can't, you obviously can't. Right. Like,
Right.
you're how much effort are you actually putting into this? Because it's not like it's magic. Like we just, put our finger out and we're ET and it just happens. We do still physically have to create something, but to know what to create, it's not like, creation is not usually, I mean, most people would say this who are into art. We're pulling from different areas all the time.
Mhm.
So we're
Yeah.
getting information from other places and all we do is compile it in a different way. Now, how do you compile it? That's when you connect, right? But as you develop that muscle to learn how to connect and get your answer and then take action, that is absolutely the same thing as all this spirituality stuff. And so for me, it was an easy transition. So that being said, I have another friend she was another hypnosis person. She actually went to her for my first hypnosis. She's written a book and we were talking about doing some illustrations for this. And she was the book is a spiritual book, but it's meant to be for children. And I just got so excited because I finally had somebody to talk to say that in fact, creativity, when people make things, whether it be movies or it be, a painting or music or anything like that, that is pulling from that source. And so it is divinely inspired. And then it's like, it's gentle because people can receive something creative, right? But
Right.
maybe they can't
Exactly.
receive an alien taking them to another place, right?
Not everyone. Yeah. Not everyone's ready for that. But yeah, art, creativity, any of that is a form of channeling. And so when people have this idea, well, I never channel or I can't channel or channeling's weird, it's like you're channeling all the time.
Yeah.
And because you are open to these, we're all connected to source and to the stream of consciousness, the information, we all can get the answers for ourselves. Whether it comes from a so-called ET or an angel or a spirit guide or whatever else
you need to name it to make you comfortable,
right?
right? Yeah.
Exactly. But we all have that ability to really connect in to that information to receive it. And I used to be, well, I still am very creative as well. I used to choreograph dance and I do all sorts of different artistic outlets. And I know that is just a form of channeling this beautiful source energy.
Well, actually, I mean, I like movies. Don't get me wrong. I love movies. And I when I left the United States on trips in the 90s, right? Okay. So obviously things have changed a lot, but when I would go out to these other places, a lot of them were in Europe, and even Europe, as advanced as it is, I was like, wow, American movies are a whole nother ball game. Like, I mean, not to discount, and they've come a long way. They definitely fool me now, but and it was really nice. And what I'm saying now is that even more, or maybe it's because I'm looking for it. I don't know. More and more of this kind of information is coming through, whether it comes through, I mean, Star Wars is accepted. And of course it was a big commercial success, right? But there's other films that are also putting ideas like that out, which I kind of found funny, frankly, when COVID hit, because I don't know if anybody else noticed the same thing happen, but I did notice we're all staying at home. We're all, a lot of people are watching a lot more TV, and boom, 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 pops up all the movies and everything that was like Contagion. And I don't remember all the rest of them because I didn't watch them. Right. Like that was it. That's creepy. That doesn't feel good for me. So, but there they are. And it's like, oh, wow, this is really happening.
Yes.
On some level, it's like, that's putting it out there. How much did that impact the outcome that we wind up having now in 2020,
Well, that's a really good question. And so, I'll fast forward from my teen years to 5 years ago when I met my Arcturians.
Okay.
So Arcturians are a completely different race. And so over the last 5 years, I've been really connecting and understanding my role with the Arcturian realm.
Mhm.
And they're the first group that I started channeling vocally.
Okay.
And one of the things that they are always sharing, and also the spiritual teacher that was channeling through at my spiritual school, same message back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, but all timelines exist simultaneously, and we get to actually consciously choose what timeline we want to be a part of. And so people that are focusing on, the horrible viruses or diseases going on and the wars and the famine, when you put your attention there, that's the reality that you're living in. But if you shift your attention to all of the things that you're grateful for and coming from a place of joy and really seeing the beauty of this earth and loving people without judgment, your experience of this earth reality is going to be completely different because you are on a different timeline from those other people.
Oh.
And so the more that you can hold the focus and the emotion as if it's already existing, then, and keep your attention away from all the negative things, the news, the media, the movies that propagate all the fear.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a completely different experience in this life.
Yeah. And that's really, I find that it's really hard for people who are stuck in whatever you want to call it. I'm going to say the word they use, which is reality, right?
Yeah.
When they're kind of stuck there, it's very hard for them to hear that. But
well, it
somebody who's
is.
come out of it, some of those things, I mean, I'm still in some of them, right? But as somebody who's come out of those things, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know what to tell them, because it's like, well, okay, if you really want to do that, you can do that. I usually wind up just going away because it's like, well, I don't want to be there.
Well, and here's what happens is that those of us who understand things from maybe a different perspective, all we can do is offer information, and whoever is ready to hear it will do that. But not everyone is ready, and that's okay, because there's no specific timeline that you have to be on. So if you want to be completely asleep in this life and just go about your life as normal, then that's fine and great. Me, I've gone through a whole roller coaster ride of lessons in my 50 years of life. And I know that my purpose for being here was I had to go through those really tough experiences to then have the compassion and empathy for people, and to show that you're not stuck. You don't have to be stuck. There is always a way out. There's always a way to shift your perspective and have a different outcome in your life. And so, whether someone's ready to hear that or not, that's on them. But at least for me, the more that I can hold that energy, then what has happened is that the people in my life that aren't at that same frequency resonance, they can't handle that energy. When we're in that higher vibrational state, if they aren't matching that to some degree, then they're going to naturally fall out of our lives. And I know a lot of people are really hung up on, well, these are my people. Well, maybe they're your people for a season, not for your entire life. And I have a lot of evidence of that in my own life, of people shedding away and me changing and growing continually.
Yep.
And meeting new people that then are at my residence. And then if I'm shifting again, I may have other new people. And so really not getting hung up on people, places, things, times, and events. That's what my spiritual teacher used to tell us. Let it all go. Don't get hung up on it. And that's tough for a lot of people.
It is. It's really tough, because especially in the belief or the thought process, I don't know what you want to call it, the box of, this is my reality. Like, we have to have a job. We have to do it this way. And if everybody around you or your family or whoever these karmic people are that are next to you are continuing to perpetuate that, which happens, that's what happens, right?
Right.
It's difficult to kind of break from that. Yeah.
It is. And Buckminster Fuller I have this quote at the beginning of my book, Sacred Soul Spaces. Environment is stronger than willpower. And so your environment not only is, the things around you, but it's the people around
Oh,
you,
yes. Mhm.
the ideas that you're putting into your head. It's multidimensional. And so what kind of environment are you immersing yourself in? And what is that doing to support you? How is that serving you?
Yeah, which I think people are a little more in tune with. Like I feel like that's a little more gentle. In the word we were talking about some pretty heavy stuff there, but a little more gentle, because I think people can associate with I don't really like that person. I don't want to go around them. I mean, I know a couple of people who are connected to me, and I know why they're connected to me, because I have some of this energy too. But um so I have a couple of friends. I would call them friends. I don't see them all the time. They come up and then they go away or whatever. And then I'll have some other friends who I'm with all the time, and then they think, oh well, I don't know, I don't want to say something bad about this other person, or that I don't like them or whatever. And they tell me, because I'm pretty open, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. And essentially it's because I study astrology, I can see, like, oh, I can pinpoint and say, oh, it's this energy, that's what you don't like. And I can
Yeah.
see why you don't like that. And I've heard other people say that same kind of thing about this person. And I know that person has that energy. So it's similar in that sense, that, you just don't like somebody, you kind of go away from them. And that's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and when I moved here to Hawaii, I got to be very choosy about who I let into my energy field.
Yeah.
Back in Olympia, I still had my very mainstream home staging interior design business, and I had to be around all these real estate agents that some of them were really nice and cool. And then others were like, oh my goodness, I do not like you. I don't want to be around you. But when I moved here to Hawaii 3 years ago, I was out of that world. I didn't have to people please anymore. And I could just really be my authentic self. Finally, I could share about the ETs and really embrace that side of me. And when I did that, that actually pulled in my soul tribe.
Yeah.
And so even if people are afraid of losing people, well, think of how freeing it is to be fully authentic, shine your light, and then you are attracting the people
Yeah.
that are in your resonance. And so that is what's happened over the last 3 years. And it's been quite amazing.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So I want to go back to the aliens as you're describing that, being your authentic self and resonating. Well, obviously there's a part of all of us that kind of stays consistent throughout our lives. And so there's part of that authentic resonance of yourself that the aliens recognized. So it sounds to me like, I mean, we have discussed that essentially. They're at a higher vibration is the way people would articulate it. But so do you think you kind of call it in because your vibration is a certain way? Or do you think, you were put here for their contact? I mean, and then my next question is have I been abducted and I don't remember it? And is that the right even word? Is that abducted? That seems wrong.
Okay, well, I'll address the abduction thing first.
Okay.
So I don't use that word because it immediately has a negative connotation. Lisa Royal Holt in the 90s, she coined a term called temporary detainment, which I prefer because it's neutral, So some people who are taken, they have a fear-based response to it. Others, like me, it was amazing. But the ones who have the fear, it's because they don't understand why they were taken. They don't understand that soul contract agreement, that nothing in this life is done to us against our will. And so every person that comes into our life, we have a soul level agreement to have bad things happen, good things happen, whatever. As far as my connection with the ETs, I know that I am way more non-human than I'm human.
Okay.
I have experienced way more non-Earth lives. And so, one of my modalities is past life regression therapy. And I'm trying to change that to parallel life.
Oh, I like
because,
that so much better. It doesn't
again,
even make any sense to me. I get into the hypnosis stuff and I'm like, okay, I actually get to because QHHT has a script, right? Which is good. Don't get me wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
But it gets the script. And within a couple of sessions, I'm like, Doesn't make any sense. How can it even be past? There's no
It's,
past.
there is no
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
and there is no future. All timelines exist simultaneously at the
Yeah.
quantum realm. And so when I've been able to experience a lot of my different lives, and I mean, we are infinite, we are multidimensional, we are living multiple lives right now. We just, when we are in our awake state in this human reality, that's just one little aspect. But when we're dreaming, we're asleep, we're in our other lives doing other work. And so I know that for me, I specifically chose to come in at this time in Earth's history because we really are on the precipice of that major shift from third dimension to fifth dimension awakening. Mother Gaia, in the timeline that I'm existing in, she's already shifted to 5D. And so those of us that understand that and are holding more of that joy, passion, play, love vibration, we are more than not in that fifth dimensional reality and there to be the light to help people wake up if they want to. Again, everyone can do whatever they want. Right. But with the ETs, because again, some of these are our family, like we have their DNA inside of us. So they are watching over us, but they can't go against our free will. And so for me, having all of these different aspects of myself. So the 13 ET races that I have channeled so far, I know that I can channel them because it is simply an aspect of myself. Like I just have to shift to that life and that experience to pull that information through. That realization was huge for me to be like fully open, like, okay, it's not scary because it's just me. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that's not a part of this. And so, some of the fear-based things that people have with being taken, the Zetas are a specific group of grays. We have all different kinds of gray races, but the Zetas are the little grays that are very commonly the ones that are taking people. Now, why they're doing that is that, and you mentioned Bashar earlier, we have a hybridization program going on. And a lot of us Earth humans have chosen to be part of this hybridization program before we incarnated into this Earth life. And I'm one of these. So I have 12 hybrid children. And so the Zetas, what they're doing is they're taking the best parts of the Zeta DNA, the best parts of the human DNA to create a spiritually advanced race of these hybrids. And Bashar is one of these hybrids.
Okay. Meaning the entity Bashar that he channels.
Yeah, he is. Okay. He is a Sasani hybrid of a Zeta human. And so
how does Daryl Anka fit into that?
Well, so Bashar is an aspect of Daryl. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Bashar has channeled through a few other people kind of randomly, but Daryl is the primary channel for Bashar.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is for me. It's a little bit of I love all that, but it's like, kind of like make a visual for myself, right? To imagine that. And I've talked about this other times. People have, you put your hand vertical and then you put your other hand horizontal right at the knuckles. And then the reference is the hand that is above the horizontal hand, right? That's spirit. That's consciousness, right? And then here we are as little parts of it. And so that makes sense. But boy, it's so complex.
I know.
You're describing it like
well, the other analogy that I like to give as a visual is a disco ball. And so the disco ball is source. It's the whole, right? It's unity. And every little fragment, every little mirror who is reflecting light into different points that look separate, that is us experiencing our humanity. But we're really, if you trace that light source back to where it came from, we're all part of the one.
Right.
And so those of us that are on the same side of the disco ball might have more of a similar perspective and outlook on life. whereas those on the opposite side of that disco ball have a very different perspective. And so there really is no right or wrong, because all perspectives are valid within that unity consciousness.
Yeah. And you know what I find really, so I came from the South, which is heavily Bible Belt, right? And I
Yes.
was actually, I would say I was blessed because my upbringing did not shove it down my throat and make me like think that this was the only reality. Not that there's anything negative about having that perspective, but it is limiting. And so I had friends of different religions, and it always interested me, especially reincarnation. I can remember being in high school, just starting to get to that. But what I find really interesting is if you're asking, I'm going to say the right, it's not right. You're asking certain people, or you hear certain people talk about even the religion, right? If they're aware of this, if they're, let's say that they're on the disco ball side, right? Like they're not the reflection or what have you. They can, depending on what their personal experience is, their intelligence level, their experience with the different avenues of information, sometimes they can just spout off. Like I connected briefly with an African, I think he was African American Jewish rabbi in Louisiana, who essentially what he did is he had like a healing house, and he and his wife basically spiritually healed people. I mean, he wasn't rolling in dough or anything like that. I don't know how he did it, but he did a sound bath for us. And when he was doing that and we were talking to him, he could just spout off, oh, the meridians are right in the Bible. It's exactly right here. And I don't know enough about the Bible to say, oh, here's the location. I know how they identify it, but that's what he was doing. And it was just amazing. And I think that there are just, it's all trickled in throughout everything. And I think that the people who are inside of a small box and have limited thinking have a really hard time being able to identify all of those codes, essentially.
Yes.
So it's still there no matter what.
It is. Well, and if you look at the true basic tenets of most major religions and spirituality, they're all the same.
Yes.
So
okay, you call them this thing. That's fine. That's pretty much what I came to a conclusion, because I had so many different friends of different religions, right? I mean, when I was younger, I did sort of think that a lot of the Christian religions were different. They're not different religions, but I did have some other ones, right? And that was what I concluded. And honestly, I'm terrible with names. So I'm like, I can't even have a hard time sticking it in there. It's like, okay, well, whatever that is, whatever that person is, even watching a movie, somebody comes in and said, what's the name of the movie? Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the name of the movie. What does that matter? Yeah.
Well, so it's humans that with their egos, they have rewritten what a lot of the original messages were and changed it and put the judgment on it.
And fear. And push all that fear in there. Yeah. Control. Exactly. It's controlling the masses a lot. Yeah.
Completely. It is total. And my spiritual school that I went to, there were some like real, for me, true nuggets of wisdom that I gained. But there was also a fear component that I did not resonate with. And that was to keep people coming back.
Oh, yeah.
And to keep that community and the money flowing in and whatever. And it wasn't from the perspective of the channel descended master coming through, is through the ego of the channeler.
Yes. And I think when you can learn to identify that, you wind up getting quite a bit of freedom, because there's different things I've been involved in too. And I tend to hesitate. I'm like, ooh, that kind of feels like ego. Like, why does it have to be this way? Is there a little bit of fear? If I don't go buy this thing, then, it just seems like that's something that's kind of prevalent, which of course it's useful for us, right? If we didn't have it, we wouldn't survive. But
yes. And like I've recently on my podcast, I had a guest who he had, I think, probably one of the biggest spiritual egos I have ever
Thanks for joining
heard.
us in the astrology series.
And it was so interesting because it was like
from the
he was
Center.
claiming, well, I am the only one
guests,
who can help
practical
people
applications
transition
of astrology
into
and
the
our
light.
astrology study group in the description.
And I'm the only one who has ever spoken to all of the
happylioncenter.com
archangels and know all of them. And it's like,
That's
No, everyone has access to this.
/astrology.
And so
Send comments,
if you are
questions, and
listening
requests
to
for discussion
someone like
topics
that,
to
and I'm
podcast
sharing this with your audience, like
happylioncenter.com.
really,
That's
you have the power within you. Always,
happylioncenter.com.
you have control of your own thoughts, your own information. You can get your own answers. It does, sometimes it's nice to have that external validation.
Yeah.
But always trust yourself, especially if you are clear and you're working on those shadows.
Yeah. I would love to dive in a little. Actually, I'd really love to dive in a little bit more with you at another time. We're running out of time here, but about, because you experienced that too, where I know I've got a lot of things going in my head right now, but essentially as humans, when we come here, we seek a security in some way. And because I study astrology, I know that everybody, and I mean, if you're human, you know this, but everybody has their own areas where they're weak or they have fear or what have you. Well, that's in the charts. It's there. You can see what it is.
It is. Yeah.
So it's there for many reasons, but I really just love to dive into that, because that is, what do we do as a human to essentially survive in this 3D earthly life as a quote human, and yet be able to also connect to the higher realms, whatever is our connection, and then continue to expand, because it's like this overlapping. You said something about a date recently, just on this interview here. You said something about a date. It was this date and this time. You were talking about being born. And I can remember once I started studying, when I wasn't even before, it was before I started studying astrology. I remember some difficult times that I was going through. And I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about my birthday. And I thought to myself, if I had been born a minute earlier, I could not have tolerated this experience, because I would have just gone berserk, or I wouldn't have even stuck around. I'd have been like, no, I can't do this. But I know that I came in to essentially cause some conflict with some people, right? So a lot of that was with me, right? But I know that I also caused conflict within other people in that particular instance. And if I had been born at any other time, I wouldn't have done it. It just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Well, and some people are here, they're born to stir shit up.
Yep. Yep, they are. I don't do that all the time, but sometimes I do. So yeah.
And there's no wrong to that at all, because any kind of polarity that we're experiencing here in this earth realm, it is simply a mechanism of evolution. It helps us learn, grow, evolve.
Yeah.
And so, so my former tyrants that I would judge, now I love them. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
I gained so much wisdom from you.
Yeah. And that's I think I don't hear it all the time, but I think it's a huge indicator of spiritual growth when you turn to those people who were such conflict for you and thank them. You're so appreciative of that situation. And it's not like a pious thing. It's like, no, I genuinely understand. I mean, you tell it to somebody and they might say it or maybe think it temporarily, but unless they feel it all the way through, they really haven't gotten to that point.
Correct. Yeah, I actually had a conversation recently with my first ex-husband, he was a major tyrant for me.
Okay.
And, I experienced emotional, verbal, a little bit physical abuse. And he was one of my greatest teachers. And I thanked him. I'm like, I know you're part of my soul family. You played this game for me in this life, I said. And so I have no bad thoughts towards you. Thank you. I forgive you for everything. And I forgive myself too.
So what did he say in response? I'm just curious.
Well, he actually had an epiphany a few years ago where he understood that we were part of the same soul family as well. Uh-huh. And it doesn't mean that his personality sometimes gets in his own way, because he's so wired to be that role.
Yeah.
But then there's this flip side. And even when we were together, it's like kind of like Darth Vader. I'm like, I know there's good in you somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, and just because I have forgiven him and I understand that, it doesn't mean that I want him in my life and my environment. It just means that, okay, I understand your role for me and thank you.
Yeah.
That's
a ton of growth, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so I'm just going to ask this. what is your perspective on, well, karma comes into play here, but really what I'm thinking of, I know that I personally have gotten to the place where I understand situations like that. Like I know that the people who cause me the most conflict are there for that same reason, right? And I don't know if the other person is. And I don't even know, to be honest with you, if I'm being really frank, I probably don't even care because I didn't like that person in my life, right? And so there's some of them, of course, I still would be able to contact if I wanted to contact them. What's the value, do you think, spiritually in being able to, is awareness the most important thing, or do you need to follow through and actually go and say to them, thank you so much for being this role in my life while they're still playing that role,
Right. No, I don't think it has to be verbally spoken to them. I mean, even a letter written that's never delivered to them, you can burn it or, just to release the energy.
Yeah.
But also really to have that awareness of how you set it up before you came into this earth life. Like you wanted to experience this as a human kind of amusement park ride. And then my Orions, when they channeled through me, they were like, okay, Earth's an amusement park. Which ride do you want to go on? What experience do you want to have? And so when you can think of it from that perspective of, we are completely unlimited in all the things that we want to experience, that we're feeding back to source. We're here to have these experiences. And so when you can forgive yourself, if you have guilt and shame for being in a situation, and love yourself fully, that love then can extend to that other person energetically and release any kind of bonds that might be there. And so it's really more for yourself than it is for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as we know, we do this work, that's what it is all about. But
yeah.
Okay. I've got one more question, then we got to end.
Okay.
You mentioned DNA, and I don't remember, you said 22 different races and, okay, here's my question. Since they're so advanced scientifically, or what we would call science, we think on this earthly plane, DNA is a physical experience, right? Or that's what we're taught. Okay. Yeah. So my question is, can they, and do they put DNA in our physical body, or is it more in our spiritual body? And does it have to be this experience that a lot of people seem to think that they would have, where there's like pain or there's needles or there's, anything like that? Or could it just be, oh, now I'm going to impart you with this DNA? So could we be not necessarily alien or not as much alien, and then we become more alien?
Okay. Well, so that's a really interesting question. So it's an energy, it's not physical. Okay. And so one of the lives that I got to experience was myself as a Sirian being. So from the star Sirius, and I was a genetic engineer sent here to help upgrade the human DNA, the human body. And we did this from our spacecraft, sending out sound frequency down to the humans. And so that sound frequency carries energy, information that then changes that DNA. And so that's one way that it has been done, but we all have this latent DNA within us. So the junk DNA that scientists refer to, it's not junk, it's latent DNA that as we are awakening, we're evolving, that DNA is getting activated to really open up all the superpowers that we actually naturally have in this human body even. And so, yeah. So we're getting activated. And so that's actually one of the things when I channel the mantis beings, they help to activate the 12-strand DNA, and they are master geneticists, master healers. And so when you really start opening up those channels, your body has an amazing ability to heal itself. Your clairs become wide open. You really are a walking superpower, superhuman being. But everyone has that inside of them. Everyone has that.
Yeah.
So it's just becoming aware that you do.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.